Hello and welcome to a Build Series Sydney. I'm your host, Danny Clayton, and joining me in the studio, film industry royalty. I'm talking about Rachel Ward and Bryan Brown. But before we have a look at their brilliant Palm Beach movie, let's take a quick peek of the trailer.
Oh, Dad, you are an obstinate, blinkered, anal, obstreperous control freak.
That's nice. Must be my birthday. Hello! I know we don't get to see each other as much as we would like to, but when we do, I gotta say it's sort of wonderful.
To friendship.
To friendship. Welcome aboard, sir.
You've done well, Frank. Real shame about that chimney. Just a tiny blip on paradise.
Our agreement. I've rethought, Lottie.
What?
Just hear me out.
We resolved it 20 years ago. We made a pact, Leo.
I'm not who I was.
Just be who you were. I've been approached to play a grandmother.
Oh, no. 60's the new 40, you know.
Yeah, sure. From behind and in the dark.
Look at us, failed jingle writer and an aging actress. The world we live in, it's over for us.
Why is Billy such an ungrateful bastard?
Listen, you little shit.
Get stuffed.
What the hell's that?
Frank!
What are you doing, Frank?
I hate you!
No, you don't.
Why'd you come? We're here to celebrate the rational, mature, wise old bloke you've become.
Talk to me, Frank.
I should never have sold the business. Ever since I've sold it, I've felt dead.
At least you have other things. Never wanted kids. Now look at yours. You have bloody great kids, Frank.
All those years he was married to his bloody business.
Oh, it got better.
It was much more than just a fling, Lottie.
I sabotage every good thing, and you're the best thing.
Sometimes you just appreciate what's in front of you. Promise me that the next 10 years are going to be our best.
You're so lucky. Why? Billy still loves you. The way he looks at you.
Oh, he's just too vain to wear his glasses. All he sees is a blur.
Please join me in making them feel welcome. Writing, directing, acting, power couple, Rachel Ward and Bryan Brown. How are you guys doing?
Thank you. Great to see you.
It must be strange watching that trailer just now, because this is something you shot quite some time ago.
A year ago.
A year ago. And I mean, sitting here and putting all this effort and time and work, and then it being comprised into this little 1 minute kind of peep. I mean, how does it feel for you guys to watch a trailer like this?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I have to think, how does it feel? Makes me smile. So I'm either smiling at what I've just seen, which entertains me, or I'm smiling at the fun we had in being able to make a movie, and that one in particular, or I'm just easily pleased. It's one of the three.
I mean, I've had the pleasure of watching the film, and I must say congratulations. It was a very strange experience, because rather than just viewing a film, it felt like I was almost an uninvited guest.
Great.
That I was
That was
somehow at the table watching this drama unfold between all these very genuine characters. So I'll ask you, as the director, how did you achieve this feeling of authenticity?
Well, I'm so glad you said. You could not give us a better compliment than that, because A, that's what we aim to do, and B, it's not easy to do, actually. So it's and it's exactly how I wanted to position the audience. I kind of wanted you to feel like you were an invited guest, but like an invisible guest, and you were just watching this world implode around you, and you can either choose to look or turn away. But no, and I guess that is it all. It's not even just about looking at last year when I look at the trailer. You look at the last 5 years, which is when we sort of started the whole thing, and the journey and the sort of the work on the script, and it's minute, the little things that you do over the years just to sharpen and get it to feel more and more genuine and more like it's the truth. And you know, when you start, you think, oh, that'll do. That's got the sort of the right idea. But in fact, it takes a lot of honing to get it so that you have that response.
Yeah, I mean, the interaction between the characters, it didn't feel like you were acting at all. It felt like someone had just set a camera up in the room and you were watching these people be people. This was probably made considerably easier with the relationships that the cast had. I mean, you're good friends with Sam Neill, I believe. How long have you been friends with him for?
40 years.
40
years, yeah. Sam and I met 40 years ago as young actors, yeah.
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 Friends immediately, or...?
Yeah, we sort of got on straight away. We're sort of different types of blokes, but I guess at the core, the way we see the world or the way we view things is pretty similar. I don't know, and also as you get older, like you get married, you have children, you share a lot of the same, you share a lot of the same, you know, life road, you know, and you know, and I guess we've been around together a lot, either in this country or even if we go away, sometimes we're in the same place. So that relationship has just survived, I guess. And I mean, the movies made me rethink, well, not rethink, but think heavily about the word friendship and what it means and how many friends you can have and what's the difference between friendship and acquaintances. You know, in my business, you've got lots of acquaintances. You know, you come across 100 people working on a movie every time. You do 80 movies, there's, you know, 80,000 people or some bloody thing. But friendship, you know, and I really have thought about it since we've been dealing with the movie. And I think it comes down to, I've decided, and that it comes down to trust. It's like someone knows you so well, or you know them so well. You don't have to be anything but you. You've revealed everything anyway. So now you're terribly comfortable. Even though you'll have arguments and disagree, that's part of friendship, about things. But you're comfortable in that person wants to be around you. That person's there for you. And you're there for them. There's a trust, and I sort of, you know, and I like having had to think about it. Yeah, and the movies make me do that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the strengths in the film is that it's relatable, even though your characters are all, you know, people that have spent years in their life building careers, watching their careers fade, and yet as a 30-year-old, I can see my friendship group, the boys, hanging out in those scenes. I'm like, this feels like my group of friends, which is, it was great. But another thing is that, I mean, straight away in the trailer, we noticed Matilda. Of course, this is your daughter, a dear friend of mine. In fact, I had a crush on her in high school. Let's not talk about it. So it must be really strange to watch your daughter light up the screen the way she did. Are you proud?
Yeah. It's really. Sorry, darling. I'll just do this bit.
Go ahead.
I jumped in.
No worries.
But yeah, no, I was thinking about that again the other day too, and like, you know, when you're working, when they say action, you're playing a scene, you're playing characters. It's something that's been created by Rachel and the writer and what we've all talked about. It's not a real thing. We have to make it real. You know, we have to, for an audience that sits there, they have to go, I'm watching something that's real and I'm drawn into it, or I don't like that character or whatever. So you're emotionally taking me. And so that's an actor at work. But when they say cut and we sit down, you know, and I glance across and I might see Matilda, and I think, I'm really glad that Matilda's doing this sort of work and is involved in being creative and doing it really good. So, yeah, it makes me feel proud.
So, you know, when you have the whole family on set, does it feel like working, or does it feel like just family time?
Well, you know, when you make a film, it is kind of family. You're locked together for 6 weeks. Very often you work as someone behind the camera. As a director, I pull my team almost from the family that I've made in the industry. It's very often the same people that you work with. Very often directors and producers, you know, they stay together, they have a relationship together, because there's nothing worse than actually going in to make something, create a collaborative endeavour, and suddenly finding, oh, my sensibilities do not align with that other person who I'm connected to and I've got to go through to the end with this. And sometimes you don't find that out until you're in the trenches, and then you suddenly realize you want to make two different films, and that's not a comfortable place to be. So it is really great to work with people that you know you've been through all that before, and particularly if it's your partner, obviously you're on the same page.
Yep.
Not that we don't have some humdingers. In fact, I don't know why we do, because basically we are on the same page nearly always.
Yeah.
It's a sort of personality thing. It's sort of like,
Did you have
but
some
we disagree.
humdingers?
I am going
people
to get my
disagree
way
about
on
things.
this one.
People do disagree about things. You'll have a strong mind attitude to know that line is really important in the thing, and I might go, no, I feel that line or what it's about has been said before, and we'll strongly discuss it to go, well, let's go with what one of us has decided.
He's very
on.
ruthless at the beginning. He's very ruthless at the script stage, which is good, and it puts you on your toes, and there's no fat, and we're not shooting scenes that we're not going to use. But I do quite like the benefit of the doubt when I go into the edit room and I want to go, that's not quite right, but that line is. And thank God I didn't let Bryan cut that one. And very often I'll go, that bloody line, it said it and he made me cut it and now it's not there.
Did you, I mean, to use your word, did you have some humdingers during this film? Did you?
Oh, yeah.
How do you resolve that?
Well, it's 5 years of writing the script.
Yeah.
So that's 5 years of being challenged. And we're in a creative game. And so you're not making a screw that's 8 inches long that there's only one way that screw can be. We've got something that's nebulous out there that we're honing and trying to shape to be something that is entertaining and that is at the same time truthful and theme-wise strong. So there's no template for it. We're creating it. So you have to be challenged. And that's why film is pretty wonderful in that it is collaborative. You're going to have arguments with heated discussions with the production designer, with an actor's going to go, look, I'm not saying that line. I just don't want to say it. I can't say it. It doesn't fit with my character, and you'll hear them out and you go, all right, that's fine. Let's go that way. But you have to be challenged. Otherwise, you'll end up with flab or repetitive things in a movie, or it'll stray from what it's meant to be. And if you can't wear being challenged, you shouldn't be in the game.
Yeah. And it's interesting because professionally you have this professional relationship, and obviously off camera you have a personal relationship. And this question comes from my dad, actually. And he's astounded that two people can be in the same industry and being in a relationship. And he was curious about how that kind of helps, whether you can work together and push each other's projects and support one another personally. Because I think that he likes the idea of letting my mum do what she has to do, and then he can escape into his work. But when you guys are so entrenched in each other's life,
you see, we met on set. So we met as at work
in 1983.
We met at work. So that was our first relationship, was a working relationship, and everything came from there. But in the end, I suppose what we saw in each other as practitioners, as actors or whatever, was the ground from which we worked. We continue to work.
And also, I have to ask this because you're playing a character. Your actual daughter is playing your daughter in the film, but it must be challenging to watch your partner kiss and make out with another woman, but you're the one directing it. So
it's quite hot.
Is it it's not what I expected you to say.
Look, he's in his jammies. It's pretty tame.
What you might see as a sex scene, I see as a stumble scene.
Oh no, I thought you were pretty graceful. You still got it.
As Sam Neill said, bedroom scenes for him now are in his pajamas with his glasses on, reading a book. Things have changed.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, when you talk about things changing. One of the characters in the film, which in a strange way I felt like I related to, was she was an actress, and she's finding that the industry is changing for her. So for you, who are these veterans of the film industry, have you watched the industry change as you've progressed through your careers?
Yeah, look, I'll speak from one area of it. Australia's an independent filmmaking nation, just as Italy is, or Norway is, or Iceland is, or Greenland, or whatever. We're an independent filmmaking nation. It's not the massive business that America is, that Hollywood is, making $200 million movies or whatever, always making large movies that go all over the world and entertain people everywhere. You're an independent filmmaking nation, so you're restricted to basically a certain number of movies that you're capable of making with the people that you have as practitioners, with the amount of money that's out there to be done. So it hasn't really changed very much in what I've seen, in that it's a hard game. You've got to be persistent. You've got to hang in there. You've got to, if you want to make a movie, you've got to go down a journey that can be at least 5 years and maybe 7 years, and then maybe you even drop it after 7 years of a lot of work and going through it. It's one of those sort of games. In other areas, yes, it's changed a lot. With the advent of television, with things like Neighbours and Home and Away, suddenly a kid can grow up and go, I want to be an actor. Well, they never, I mean, in my day, I couldn't grow up thinking I want to be an actor, because actors were English people or American people doing American or English films. We didn't have films. The resurgence started in the late 60s, you know, and that meant kids could grow up going, I want to be an actor, I want to be a director, I want to be, you know, things that you could never imagine in my day. So there's a lot more people wanting to be in the game. Culturally, I've watched it change too. I mean, I did a movie, 3 movies ago, I did one called Australia Day, which was set in Brisbane, multicultural suburbia. You know, the culture of Australia has changed.
Yeah.
You know, there's 160 different nationalities live here. I've just finished a film down in Melbourne called Hungry Ghosts, which is basically the Vietnamese community, for a 4-hour one. That wouldn't have been there when I was starting in the 60s. The advent of the indigenous cinema and television that's opened up, you know, that's a big change. These changes are going on, and there's a push that Rachel's involved with in making sure that the women are getting there to tell their stories. So big changes going on, but how many you can make are still probably, that hasn't changed, because there's only so much money there. So you're being challenged more and more. If you want yours there, you've got to beat a whole lot of other people or convince a whole lot of other people that yours should go ahead instead of someone else's.
Definitely. And touching on that point about what you're doing in cinema at the moment, employing predominantly women to work on the film. So how many women were working on this particular film?
I don't know how many women, but we had 51% were women. So,
Okay.
And that was a very conscious thing, certainly from my part, because being a woman in the industry as a director, our percentages are diabolical. And although Bryan, and all that is changing, but it has been totally colonized by white male as the directors. So, and that is, you know, and it is changing. It's probably the most difficult for the old practitioners like myself and Bryan, because your world is changing. You're into, you know, in the streaming, you're into exactly what we're doing here, the build. You are recognizing all these other platforms of which you can be engaged. For us, that's quite threatening, because we only know 2, which is TV and film. But anyway, with the Dame changes that I'm involved in, which in fact there is a screening on Friday at the Dendy Keys at 6:15, and there is still a few seats left, and it's a fundraiser.
Get involved, everybody.
A fundraiser for
See you
Dame
there.
Changes, which is basically helping women, sort of mid-career women, basically, keep hanging there, develop their scripts, understand the game that they're in, how to target an audience, find their audience, and hone their script accordingly. So it's basic, just giving that extra confidence and mentoring to women in the industry, because a lot of us are in there, have a go when we're young, do a few short films, get a few web series, that sort of thing, and then suddenly you're in the commercial arena, and then it's like, whoa, he was behind me a minute ago, how come he got that gig? And then he went on to do that and that. And unless we really make sure that the women who get into power or get into an opportunity to hire women, if we don't do it, it will never change.
It
So, and
seems
it's
like-
not hard because obviously there's some great talent out there, and it's just about thinking outside the box and going, no, I don't have to have a gaffer who's male. I don't have to have a soundy who's male. Where are the females? And the minute you hire basically, if you get the heads of department are women, they usually bring a lot of women with them.
Which is fantastic. And I mean, collectively, you've worked on hundreds of films. It's actually astronomical, and when you try to look at the body of work that you've both accomplished. And it sounds like you're almost taking responsibility as these film veterans to support and push and kind of really...
Not only that, but actually I'm not being that, that idealistic with... Really, it's having experienced it and knowing what it is like to spend 6 years not being able to get a job, and it's very dispiriting. So you have to experience it to know, to really be galvanized to change it.
Okay, so I mean, if we look at the Australian film industry at the moment, some big things are occurring. You have like Marvel filming Ragnarok on the Gold Coast. You have Terminator being filmed here. Industrial Light Magic, of course, a Disney company with post special effects, is starting a Sydney branch. So a lot of these changes seem to be occurring. Where do you think that this industry will be going? Your predictions of what do you think will occur here in Australia? Will we have an industry where instead of actors going to another country to find recognition on the silver screen, they just stick around here? I mean, where do you see us going?
That's already changed totally differently to my time. Is that young actors and actresses in this country are auditioning, and their auditions are being sent to America straight away. They're not being asked to go over their auditions. That's happening with every young actor and actress in the country. That America or England have got some big show on they're doing. They'll go, here's the age group and what we want, and they'll be getting in touch with the casting agents in Australia, and they'll be putting people down on tape or on digital and sending it over to them. So that was never, if you wanted to have a shot at doing something internationally, you had to go there, be there,
Get a visa.
Hang out for months, go up and see a casting agent. I mean, but that's the game. I mean, and those that are persistent stayed there and things happen to them. But there's a lot more opportunity to be seen, but a lot more people wanting to be seen. I just go back to this movie Palm Beach that we did, and talking about women in a position. It's quite interesting when you think the most influential things in a film are the producers, the director, the writer, the editor, and the cinematographer, right? Well, in this film, the producer was one man and one woman, the director was a woman, the cinematographer was a woman, the writer was a woman or two women, and the editor was a man. So that's 2 out of 6 of the heavily artistic decisions that are made in the movie were that. And then if you want to throw in another incredibly important part, is the production designer, a woman. So that's in very authoritative and the most significant positions in the filmmaking game.
I mean, Bryan was only saying the other day that if me and Joe, Mary Smith, who was the writer as well, if we hadn't been involved, it would have been a very different movie, because it was very much inspired by an incident that Bryan observed a Christmas that we all spent in Wales, where a number of the men were in quicksand, were kind of having an existential crisis. And he recognised that. So that was his focus. He wanted to really make a film about that, the times of change for those men. But bringing Joanna and myself on board, of course, we were not more interested, but we were equally interested in what the women were going through, having to support this men. And why weren't they having the existential crisis? How come they were actually managing this time of life much better than the men? And what was that about? But again, what was their issues? And I think you'll agree when you see the film, it's actually, yes, I suppose you could say the main protagonist is Bryan, but the women play as solid a role, and you're on their journey as much as you are with the men.
And they're dealing with things. They're dealing with health issues and career issues as well.
But very often the female perspective, very often when it's the men at the helm, they're ignored, or they're two-dimensional, or they're the wife, or the girlfriend, or they're the one in the bathing suit, Yeah. So when it's a woman behind the lens, looking, she's obviously that's not. She's the woman is not the sexual quotient.
Of course, and it almost felt like there was a great deal of tact when the women characters were being portrayed very just genuinely. Like I felt like I knew these people, that I've spent time with these people at family gatherings. And
Well, you have, Matilda.
I don't mean literally. And it is quite great watching how the women were so much better at communicating their issues, and blokes have a tough time talking about their feelings.
Yeah.
And mental health was.
Why is that? Isn't it fun talking about your feelings?
No, I'm okay. I'm one of those new age dudes.
But you're veiled. You do talk about your feelings.
You can rationalise it any way you like. I mean, I don't think we can say particularly why we don't. But there can be areas of, I don't want to burden that person with my, my problem or whatever. I'd rather keep my emotions and in. I think it probably goes right back to the cavemen and cave women and how you behave. I think there's a
monkeys more like
real DNA in there in that sort of stuff. Women are always so much more emotional about anything, so it will come out, and once it's come out, then they'll talk about it. It's not just emotion.
We're curious. We're curious about the human condition, I think, more than.
Well, I was curious about the idea of doing this film, so we're curious too, right? We are curious beings. It's just as we do express ourselves very differently, men and women, and I think women. I find that women are happier to express their emotions, and we aren't. But the question is, why are they and why aren't we? I don't think either's right or wrong. I think they are just something about how we are as people. It is interesting since we made this movie, and when we started on this 5 years ago, it was to make a genuine movie about a group of people and the problems they were necessarily discussing. Since it's come out, the amount of talk that's out there about men and mental health has surprised me. And because I had a situation myself where I went through about 9 months, I found out I had anxiety and I didn't know what was going on with me. And even when that happened, I was confused. So to be confused was hard to say to someone like, I'm not sure who I am. You think where are we going to get to on that? So I was confused. Then I went to see a psychologist and it helped me get through it. And I was getting through it when we had this, sort of to the end of it when we went to this Christmas. But I'm so interested in the fact that this subject, when I go to a place and we talk about the movie, is being brought up. And when I do some of the Q&As in the places, I'm getting people emailing and saying, I'm really glad you're talking about this. And yet when we started this movie, it wasn't to talk about that at all. So there is something going on about maybe men are starting, maybe they had to be given a liberty to talk about it. I don't really understand why we don't discuss things as like personal things like women do. I don't quite understand it.
I think the symbolic kind of nature of this film, Palm Beach, you're in this idealistic paradise, and all of these people are having these inner turmoils, is such a great kind of way of expressing this issue, because people are having all this trouble talking about these things on the inside, yet on the outside everything seems so peachy. So you did raise Q&A. We are getting questions from the viewers who are watching right now. So I'm going to throw a few at you if you don't mind. But before I do that, I did want to talk to you about filming in winter, because it looked like such a warm. It's kind of you watch the film and I felt hot. I was like, oh gosh, it's so sunny. But you shot in winter. What were some of the challenges of shooting a summertime film in the middle of a very, very cold winter?
Well, one of the days that the actors had to be so on their game was the picnic scene, because that took pretty much all day. And when we got off that boat, which was at the basin, and it was like -2 degrees, and it had a sort of the wind chill factor of about -2 degrees, and it felt like it was going to, it felt like we were going to have to crack ice on the water bottles. It was that cold. And everyone was sort of hanging onto their puffers. And then it would be this terrible moment when everybody said, okay, and we're rolling, puffers, go. And everybody had to, you had to pull these puffers away from everyone. And most of them were saying, my lungs are shattering so much. And that was just absolute commitment from the actors, and you know.
And there was a breeze too, which didn't help. You know, it was cold and a
very
breeze.
cold. Yeah. And your nose went bright red. They were having to run in and cover your nose.
I'd been drinking the night before.
They would. Definitely.
And we had to swim.
It was hard, and you had to swim.
And we had to swim. We had to go in at Palm Beach there, and that was going. You know, you're in there for an hour because even though everyone's hurrying with setting up cameras and that, you know, you're in the water.
Sam looked like a microwave oven dinner. He was just covered in tin foil.
Poor bugger.
Yeah.
It looked like a fun film to shoot. I mean, a lot of drinking, a lot of eating. Did you actually get to enjoy all that food, or was it just staged?
No.
Definitely not.
No,
Not allowed to touch the props.
You know, that's you do learn as an actor early on, you know, don't eat too much in a scene because they're going to go, continuity's going to say, listen, you had something in your hand when you were doing that from that angle and you ate it. And so you learn very quickly to sort of play with food when you're when you're acting in a food scene. Yeah.
Okay, so we have so many questions coming through at the moment. What advice would you give to the next generation of actors, directors, and producers?
Well, you know, it's interesting, this sort of mentoring thing. I think you just sort of have to just support them emotionally as much as anything. Let them know it's hard, it's tough, don't have expectations. Anything you get is gravy. Do not imagine just because, you know, you're listening to me right now and I'm directing a film that, it's just open slather for women or minorities, just go there and do it. It is very competitive and it's tough. And I think that was what I had when I first came here. I went, there's Jane Campion, there's Gillian Armstrong, there's Sophia Turkowitz. There's women behind the camera here, yay! And then you get there and you go, but they were probably the only ones that were behind the camera. So I think it's about not getting in their way, and I think it's about everybody has got their own story, their own sensibility, and you need to be very careful that you don't get too prescriptive on it, and just support whatever it is that they want to say and how they want to say it, and just be there as, I've been there, that's tough, isn't it? You know, and keep going, and I don't know, just get out of there. Basically, like I've been saying to the white male, just get out of my way.
I would say, I don't think it ever changes. It's not just down to my game, but persistence. If you want to be in it, you're going to have to persist. You're going to have to stay the road longer than someone else. If it's going on and on, if you've got a talent and you believe in yourself, you've got to hang in for that moment, that bit of luck where suddenly someone says, so-and-so's dropped out, will you do this, or whatever. And the other thing I'd say is don't be a snob. Don't say that's too good. When you're a young actor and whatever, just get in the game. You know, get the first opportunity as an actor, you've got to go. You know, they want you to just come in and say hi and hand out a plate. Do it. Someone says, look, you can be an assistant to the director on this for 10 weeks. You know, do it.
Have you had those roles, Brian?
Have I what?
Have you had those roles where you've had to come in and hand a plate to a director?
I've said yes to everything. When I went to England in the 70s to become an actor, because here everyone was being American or English on stage. There was no film or television particularly. And I went, well, I'm not going to do it secondhand. I'll go there and become a POM or whatever. And I went to England. The one thing I knew was that I had to get into the theatre. And I arrived at a place called Mykonos in Greece, and on my way to England, and I was talking to a young English guy who was told me that his parents lived in a council flat in Chelsea, and we were chatting on, and he said, what are you going to England for? I said, I want to be an actor. And he said, my father's in the theatre. And I went, oh, really? My ears pricked up. And I said, what's he do? He said, he's a fireman. Now, in England, every theatre has to have a fireman because you've got to have a steel thing that comes down in front of the stage, and you know there's lots of electrical and a fire could start. So there's a fireman designated to every theatre, and particularly to those big theatres in London. Now, he said, look him up, and I went, right, what's his address? And as soon as I got to England, I rang that bloke, and I said, can I come and talk to you? And he then sent me to the chief fireman. The chief fireman rang up a theatre and said, there's a young bloke here wants a job working backstage. They gave me the union card that I needed, and I started pushing scenery. And in pushing scenery, there was a young actor pushing scenery. I said, how do you get into this? He said, you got to write to the provinces. I wrote to the provinces. But the thing is, I could easily have sat there and gone, oh, fireman, that's not what I want, and not taken advantage of that situation. So I think you mustn't be a snob. If you want a job in anything in the creative areas, have your ear open. They want someone to put the tea, to deliver the tea to the director in a film, do it. Because if you're any good and you've got any talent, it'll get recognised. It'll get recognised. So put yourself in the game.
It's amazing that this internationally recognised, award-winning actor at one stage was pushing set stages around working
and loving it.
And loving it.
And loving it.
That's a fantastic story. I really like this question because it's very short and sweet. Richard E. Grant, sweetie? Question mark.
Sweetie.
Is he a sweetie?
That's very good. Yes, he is a sweetie, and yes, he can be a devil.
I'll leave it at that. Rachel, you're an award-winning actress and director. What was the transition to director like, and did your acting experience make you a better creative in that regard?
I think having been an actor, I'm very attuned to the vulnerabilities of actors and also what they bring, how much more they can bring to a storytelling than just say the line "sweetheart," which is a couple of the directions I had when I questioned anything or said, I think I could say this or I could do this. Just say your line, sweetheart. So I'm very aware of what an actor can bring, and I love what an actor brings. I can't wait to find, when we get into the rehearsals, how much the actors getting the lines in their own mouths and using their own vernaculars or the vernacular of the character that they've found, how much it then just takes the whole project that other notch forward. And I'm also aware of how insecure we are, how vulnerable we are, how we are, you leave yourself very open when you stand up on stage to all kind of, love, encouragement, but also vitriol. And I think as an actor or as anybody who stands out there, you're aware of that. And I'm certainly aware of my actors when they're, doing a scene or, and there's a whole phalanx of people standing there watching them, and they may not get it right, or they may feel awkward about something, or they just maybe physically exposed. And I think having been there, I go, oh God, I'm so glad I'm not you, but I'm right here, and I'm protecting you.
You're there to protect us. Yeah,
I'm protecting you.
Yeah. But tell him how you made that transition to getting behind the camera.
Oh yeah. So when I came to Australia, it was quite hard for me to get work in Australia because even if I do a rather bad Australian accent, I just am English. I'm just, I just did not get really away with playing an Aussie. And so I went back to uni and did communications, but my kids were in school and they were onto Tropfest. And their whole class wanted to do a Tropfest film. So a couple of the mums in the schools had sort of husbands or whatever who were in the industry, and we sort of pulled a few favours. And we made this, we came up with this little script, we wrote the script, and the kids were in it, and I was going to have to direct it. And I'm like, nah, I don't know what to do. And I really hadn't been paying that much attention about cameras and lenses and all that sort of thing. Anyway, so I then lassoed Gregor Jordan, who did Two Hands with Bryan. And I said, I'm going to need your help here, Greg. And he said, don't be ridiculous. You don't need my help. Just put the camera there and just turn it on and do it. And I did. And then, of course, we shot the whole thing. It was lots of fun. The kids loved it. But the kids were not interested in the post of making the film at all. They just scattered. So I was left to sort of put the film together. And I just loved it. Loved it. And from then on, I went, I'm doing this.
You got the bug?
I got the bug, yeah.
Oh, fantastic story. I'll ask one more question from the people sending them in. Love the film Cocktail. What is it like looking back on a big Hollywood film like that and the people that you've worked with, such as Tom Cruise? I'm guessing that's for Bryan.
That was 30 years ago. In fact, I just got an invitation last year to go back to Jamaica for the 30th anniversary of their film festival, and they wanted to show Cocktail in Jamaica. For a while there, it did go through my mind, why not go back to Jamaica and have a bit of fun? But it was 30 years ago, and it was in the past. My record well, let's just start from the fact Jamaica. What a great opportunity. Someone says, you want to make a film, we're going to do part of it in Jamaica. I mean, turn that down. The other thing was that, a couple of things on that movie. It came from a book called Cocktail. And the book was written by a man called Woody Gould, who'd written a screenplay for a thing called Fort Apache, the Bronx, which was quite a tough movie with Paul Newman back there 40 years ago. The book was really about celebrityhood and the hollowness of celebrityhood. That's what, and at that time in the 80s, the bartenders in New York were celebrities, you know. So he wrote this book called Cocktail, which then was auctioned and turned in, and they wanted to make a film of it. The first script I read that they sent to me and asked me to do it, to play one of the bartenders, was really a great script, quite dark, as the book is. And anyway, then Tom was brought on board to be the lead and to play that. Once Tom was on board, the movie, there was an emphasis of changing it a bit, because Tom was a very popular young actor for his age group and whatever. So a lot of the darkness was lessened and became less a dark story, more a love story, perhaps you could say. The great thing was they never changed my character in that. My character commits suicide in the end. I mean, he ends up leaving him a note saying, "Listen, mate, I'm full of it. I'm full of shit. I talk shit." You know, but he's quite a colourful character. My character, he seems to be on top of everything, but he's not.
So sort of typecasting.
So very good casting. I thoroughly enjoyed it, even though the movie changed a bit. I thoroughly enjoyed what I had to play in that. The big thing, of course, is that Tom and I changed the nature of bartending for the next 10 or 15 years. No one was doing that stuff that we were doing, throwing bottles behind them. And we got so good at it that we were doing things that the bloke that taught us had never done. We did things in unison, throwing them backwards and forwards to each other over our shoulder. We did a lot of great stuff. You had to stay very flexible, your wrists and that. And in fact, the hotel I stayed in New York, there were bottles and glasses all around my room, and I'd get up in the middle of the night for a piss, and I would grab a bottle, or grab a glass, throw it on the way there, and on the way back, throw it again and go back to sleep. You had to stay very flexible. It was very important. And that stuff was pretty wonderful. What I've got to say, though, is if they tried to make that movie now, we'd never be able to make it the way we made it. They wouldn't allow the people to be right on the bar in front of us while we're tossing bottles in the air, and those little pricks that steel things that come out that is dangerous. But we got away with it. They wouldn't allow that now. They say everyone has to be back 10 metres or 5 metres, and then they'd maybe CGI everyone to the front of it now. It'd be a whole different ballgame. Tom, working with Tom, he's actually a very delightful fellow, massively respectful. I never heard him say a rude word to anyone, no matter who they were, in any way or form. And anybody that's worked with Tom will say the same thing. He's very respectful. He works his ass off. He's got where he has been because he really wants that. You know, he works incredibly hard. He takes on projects. So, there's a Tom that has to do with Scientology and stuff like that I know nothing about. The man that I worked with for the period I worked with was a genuine actor sharing a movie and the fun that is involved in. Yeah.
So, Bryan Brown, do you know how to make a red eye?
Do I know how to make a red eye? Once upon a time.
You've forgotten, though. It'd be criminal for me to let you go without discussing one of my favourite Australian films of all time, which is Two Hands. For me, I think that it really gave me hope with what we could achieve in this country. The performances were just incredible. The direction was brilliant, the writing, fantastic. It was just everything came together to make what I still think is a perfect film.
And it's a very funny movie.
And very funny, but dark and funny.
Darkly funny.
Were you one of Matilda's friends who used to come around and steal things from the house so they could have something for their Pando shrine?
No, I was one of the boys who would try to ring Matilda, and then you would answer the phone, and I'd go, "Oh my God, Pando!"
Pando,
hang up really quickly.
Yeah, that was rather good. That I'd I'd played Pando just around the time boys came sniffing around the house for my daughters, and they'd knock on the door and I'd open the door and they'd shit themselves.
It's so unbelievably true. I knew a few guys who would be afraid to ring the Brown house purely because we were terrified of your character, of course.
Of course, yeah.
My daughters are now 50 and they're both unmarried.
But Two Hands, is it a film that you've seen recently or had a chance to rewatch?
No, I probably haven't seen it probably since the time it was done there. I've seen bits of it a lot of the time. And, of course, the very sad thing was that Heath Ledger died, 10 years ago. And he and Rose Byrne were delightful, young, up-and-coming actors at the time, fantastic kids, fantastic young actors and that. And like Rose has gone on to it and Heath's gone somewhere else, and that was just very sad. And a terrible thing, more for his parents, of course, when you lose a child than anything else. But a loss to the industry of a great young actor that would have delighted people in lots of ways. But I had a great time. I had a great time doing that. And I did say to Gregor Jordan had this whole totally like that I was wearing stubbies and thongs and t-shirt, for the whole thing. And I sort of delighted in the fact that that's all I had to put on when I went to work.
It's just like your regular everyday attire.
Well,
really.
You are probably right.
May I say that prior to this interview, I was actually genuinely a little bit nervous, but this has been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed myself. Rachel, Bryan, thank you so much for coming in to Build. Palm Beach, you must check it out. It is a fantastic, fantastic film. Please a round of applause for Bryan Brown and Rachel Ward.
Thank you, mate. Very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.